about to start and have a conversation about the universe and all its complications. Step right in, we've been waiting for you to say that you're confuddled. Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da. Yeah, we've been waiting for you, waiting for you.
Hello and welcome to Confuddled, the philosophy podcast where we try and sort through the muddied waters of life to try and find a little bit of clarity while having a few laughs along the way.
And very muddy waters indeed. I'm Azul, this week's host.
And I'm Alex.
Here's how it works. Every week we have a new topic, but only this week's host knows what it is. This week I'm the host, and Alex has no idea what we're going to talk about.
No, but I'm really excited. I know you're going to have something good in store.
Well, I hope this satisfies your desires for a good chat and that sort of thing.
Well, we always do.
That's fair. So let's start with a question. This is just to set the stage. Have you watched Good Will Hunting?
I have. It's a brilliant movie.
What do you think about it?
It's a brilliant movie.
Oh, yeah. So for anyone who hasn't watched Good Will Hunting, you should totally watch it. It's about this young adult, you would say, with a genius-level IQ.
Yeah, Matt Damon, played
by Matt Damon. He's a janitor at MIT, and he essentially solves this really complicated, but really actually not so complicated math puzzle, and then gets into the middle of a lot of hijinks and that sort of thing. It's quite a famous movie, and it's been parodied a lot of times in Simpsons and Family Guy and so on and so forth. Anyway, so back to the topic. So this week, we're going to talk about how Good Will Hunting, or more specifically Robin Williams, is related to zombies.
What? I'm speechless, which is not good for a podcast.
No.
But I'd never put Robin Williams and zombies together.
Well,
in fact, I think, Robin Williams is quite animated. To me, it feels like the complete opposite of zombies because he was so full of life,
It's a very fair point, and I think I don't think I'll change that opinion. In fact, I agree with that opinion. So this conversation takes into account Robin Williams' animatedness into this as well.
Okay.
Did you know, for anyone who hasn't watched the movie, this is a bit of a spoiler, but in that section where he talks about his wife farting,
I completely forgot about that. I've forgotten most of that movie.
Do you remember it though, at all?
No, not the bit about the wife farting, so I'm very amused. Let's talk about some farting.
He was talking about farting, and it was completely improvised. So much so that Matt Damon could not resist laughing. And that whole scene, it was like 5 minutes or so, completely improvised. And
really?
Yeah.
And Matt Damon, did he actually laugh in that scene?
He did. You can see, if you watch it again, you could see him trying to stifle his laugh because the laugh wasn't supposed to be originally in there.
No
and so
way.
The whole thing is just them laughing. Them genuinely laughing. It's like such a genuine moment there.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that when they do that in films.
It's amazing.
Have you watched this is completely different, but have you watched The 40-Year-Old Virgin?
I have not.
So there's a scene in there where Steve Carell gets, this is very famous, he gets his chest waxed.
Oh, I have seen that.
Yeah, they do it in one take, and it's live. So then, but you can see some of the, you can see Paul Rudd in the background, like really trying to keep it together. Because there's only one take, and he's just trying so hard not to lose it. It's brilliant. There's a lot of pressure on that, but I love it when they include those improvised scenes,
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We're getting a bit out of topic, but let's get back to point. So, Robin Williams and zombies. So you may ask, what the hell is all? What is this?
Yeah, what the hell is all? What is this?
So appropriate. So you know me, I'm a tease. I'm not going to tell you exactly how the two are related right now. I'm going
Zombies, Robin Williams, and you being a tease.
Well, they're all interrelated.
They're all related.
Yes. I'm going to basically drag you through all the philosophy, which is quite a change for me, to be honest, because I like starting with the story. But today I'm going to start with the philosophy so we can get that aside and give you all context, as well as you, Alex.
Okay, guys, get out your togas.
Get out your togas, get out your notebooks,
yep,
and everything of the sort. So we'll start by something that you may have heard, and it's a core tenet of general philosophy. It's something called physicalism versus dualism, and by dualism I mean specifically dualism of the mind. So let me explain.
Okay.
Physicalism, explained briefly, is basically everything is physical.
Okay.
It essentially states that everything in existence, cause, effect, all sorts of things are all physical. So much like a cloud is essentially a great number of water droplets in the sky, or that thunder is essential, or lightning is essentially just a discharge of electric energy.
Yes.
Physicalism essentially says that you feeling pain or your thoughts or you reacting to something is also a physical process.
As in, like, maybe chemicals in the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard of that argument before. Like, everything's a chemical reaction in the brain, even like emotional responses. And
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So basically stating that everything that is there to know is a physical process. So your emotions, your soul, your consciousness, everything is physical.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. I know that you have very many things to say about that.
Yeah. Yes. I'm like, no, don't agree with that. But is that essentially materialism?
It is, yes. Well, for the most part, the terms are used interchangeably, but there's a lot of philosophers who think that one is quite different from the other, and there's a lot of debate going on about that. But for the most part, taking it as interchangeable is a good way to go, at least.
Okay, that's very interesting, and I think very wrong. But what was the other aspect?
So the other aspect is something called dualism, and I do have to specify that this is dualism of the mind.
Okay.
It essentially states that the mental and physical realms are both real, and that neither can really be assimilated by the other. So it's essentially two distinct areas. They do interact with each other, certainly, but it essentially says that there are two realms of existence, the physical and the mental, as opposed to physicalism that essentially says everything is physical.
Okay.
So I imagine dualism is more along the lines of what you believe in.
Actually, no.
Oh, okay.
No, well, yes, it's closer than physicalism.
Yeah.
I would say, according to many spiritual traditions, if you go especially the mystical aspects, it's all about non-dualism, about oneness. So I would argue that everything is interrelated in one cohesive whole.
Right.
So I would probably, from what I've read and learned, I would probably lean towards that. There seems to be evidence pointing towards that. At the very least, I think most people would be based in dualism.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
I understand that most philosophers apparently don't believe in dualism.
Right.
But
they believe in physicalism, do they?
More people firmly believe in physicalism than there are people who firmly believe in dualism.
Wow.
There are people who believe in things called epiphenomenalism.
Okay, we like our large words. Remember that, guys. If you want to throw that in a dinner party, epiphenomenalism.
Thank you. Yes, that's what it is.
I think these entrees were epiphenomenal.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
No one's not going to know, that you're using it in the wrong way, unless they're,
Let's hope not.
Yeah, let's hope not. But hey, give it a go. We might get some, good points in a dinner party. Anyway.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
So both dualism and physicalism have been within philosophy since the dawn of time, really, starting with Platonic dualism.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea about the cave and how there's the real image and the not so real image that we perceive, subjectivity and the sort.
So there's like the supposed Platonic, I forgot what the name of the world was, where you have all the abstractions, all the ideals of those ideas, and then you have the real world when everything's just a shadow of those ideals.
Yeah, basically. Right? Yeah.
Okay.
We won't go into that as much because that's quite far behind and it's not really true dualism. You must have heard of the quote, or Plato is the father of Western philosophy and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it was more based or originated
Exactly.
and developed from there and evolved from there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So most things that we know and believe in now could be traced back to Plato.
It's quite remarkable that one man had that much of an influence.
It's amazing.
Who would have
to be
thought?
honest.
One man.
Like how many years?
A couple thousand years ago.
3,000, 2,500, something like that.
Amazing. Imagine if he knew how much influence he would have.
Wow. Imagine. Yeah, that's amazing.
You're going to influence thousands of years ahead of you, and people will still remember your name and have your works written out in numerous languages and be studied for like thousands of years. Like, how amazing is that?
That would be impressive.
Yeah.
Oh man, that would be something to aspire to, really.
That's pretty close to immortality, as some people think
I'd
of
say.
it.
Yeah, Keats would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would.
Keats was a wonderful poet, so you haven't checked him out. Check him out.
Yeah, I recommend Ode to a Nightingale. Or Ode to a Grecian Urn, or really anything.
Any ode.
Yeah.
Yeah. You really owed it to yourself to read it.
And the Alex jokes have begun.
The puns have begun.
So let's start in this journey through the history of physicalism and dualism. And I'm going to go through the history of physicalism and dualism quite quickly, mainly because there's a lot of facets to it, there's a lot of nuances to it, and we can't really explore everything within it with the amount of time we have. But I'll touch on the major aspects so that we can actually move on to the important part of our conversation. Not that philosophy isn't important, but the fun part, for some of you, will come after this history lesson, shall we say.
Okay, so this is the context so we can understand what we're talking about.
This is the context. This will give you more of an idea of how to comprehend or critically think how Robin Williams is related to zombies.
That's right. I completely forgot we're talking about Robin Williams and zombies.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
Let's start with the arguments for physicalism and then go into dualism. So to start with, there's a Australian philosopher named Daniel Stoliar.
G'day, mate.
Just across the pond.
Just
really.
across the ditch?
Yeah. He basically summarized the major two arguments quite simply by stating the first one as the argument for methodological naturalism. It's a bit of a mouthful.
It's a great mouthful.
The argument for methodological...
So tongue twister, guys.
Naturalism. Oh, that's
All right.
amazing.
The Peter Piper pecked a pickled pepper, blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. That's how I feel now, audience. This is terrible.
Methodological naturalism.
Yes, methodological naturalism.
Say that a few times, guys. Methodological naturalism, okay.
So it's essentially stating that it is a rational state of being to believe that one should be guided by the principles of natural science. And by that, I mean the scientific method. So you hypothesize, you test something, you observe, and so on and so forth, and iterate until you come to a valid conclusion. And that is as true as you can get. And that idea has served us for countless millennia and will probably serve us for countless more. The argument for methodological naturalism essentially states that given that it's valid to believe in the scientific method, the only way of perceiving the world as we know it based on the scientific method is viewing the world as purely physical.
A bit of a stretch, maybe.
Mainly
resistance forming in my mind.
Mainly because within the scientific method, you place emphasis on removing the observer, so subjectivity is removed.
Right.
Albeit there are criticisms of the of the scientific method as well, and I feel like that's where you were coming into why aren't we taking into account emotion and so many other mental processes that actually affect things, and with quantum physics and the observer changing things.
Yes, I was going to say that. Yeah.
There's a lot to work on that area.
You could, I think quantum physics would say that it's impossible to remove an observer.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Because the observer is also a part of the equation or determines certain outcomes.
Yes.
But regardless, that's the original argument from methodological naturalism.
Methodological naturalism?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, great.
Obviously, that's just a high-level abstract of what it is, and there are nuances. The next part is a bit easier to understand. It's called the argument of causal closure. It essentially states that all physical processes must have a physical cause.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
So everything that happens in the world is caused by physical objects in the world, and therefore whatever caused those physical objects or actions or interactions have also been caused by physical causes.
But what if, for example, with a human being or any sentient being that has an emotion, they're motivated by an emotion which leads them to do an action, which leads to a physical reaction?
Yep. So a physicalist would say that before that emotion, something in the physical world occurred that led to your chemical reactions causing that emotion that leads to you moving,
argument.
And then you doing whatever you did as a reaction to your emotions.
Aha, that's a good point.
It's just a matter of perspective, really. You could argue that, actually the whole thing is consciousness and therefore the opposite. But I think it's just a term of semantics, really. They just call it the physical.
Okay.
Yeah. That's physicalism. And that gives you an idea of why somebody would believe physicalism and why somebody would just take physicalism into heart. And that's...
and I had a conversation with someone who was a real physicalist.
Yeah.
But I actually didn't know it was called that. But,
right.
He was arguing how everything was, chemical reactions in the brain, all emotions, thought, and everything. So he's really purely physicalist.
Yeah, as a slight tangent, as a statement, and I mean no offense to any physicalists, but I feel like, and perhaps this is because I don't know much about, like, I don't know a lot about physicalism and physicalists in general, but I feel like physicalism is quite a non-romantic way of viewing the world.
Yeah, I think to me it seems very cold.
Yeah.
But do you know what? Those physicalists, they you don't want to offend them, Azul. They bench press. They do a lot of physical activity. They bench press. They go to the gym. They're very muscly guys.
Oh yeah.
And gals, and they'll beat you up. They'll beat us up.
Fun times.
You know, us mind-only people. We always get picked on by those physicalists.
Oh dear, the sad, sad times.
But hey, we might get telepathy one day, so you never know. We could win the fight.
Here's to hoping. So moving on to dualism, and this I feel like you'll find interesting quite a bit because it has a lot of ideas that you will resonate with at the very least. We can go all the way back to 1925.
Oh, my favourite year in the 20s.
Actually, 1925 is a nice year.
Is it? Yes.
Yeah, as a general, as far as years can go in the 20s, it's a nice year.
Feels nice.
So we go to a bloke named C.D. Broad.
Was he dodgy?
I don't know.
He was a bit seedy, was he?
I mean,
broadly speaking,
he was a bit seedy.
Hey, okay. Do we need I think we need like a points, like a cruel system for all the puns I make.
And we can just tally off like your things.
Yes.
Oh yeah. As I was saying, so CD Broad, or like, that's actually a name, like CD Broad. Can I get a CD Broad here?
CD Broad. Hey, it sounds like a New Yorker. Hey. Can I get a CD broad?
Basically.
Don't want a blonde. I want a broad. That was my terrible attempt at a New York accent, but
apologies to any New Yorkers.
Yes.
He was quite a individual actually. He was an epistemologist, a historian of philosophy, a philosophy of science, a moral philosopher, and the list goes on.
Wow, he sounds amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. But he was what many people believe started off the idea of actually putting into words the idea of dualism. So he said, imagine an archangel came to Earth, a fundamentally different being than you and I, than humans. Imagine this archangel knew about everything in the world, knew about all the chemical processes that go into creating the world because God created the world and so forth, right? And now imagine that he comes down and has a conversation with you talking about ammonia.
Right.
He could know about the chemical formulations of ammonia. He could know about the structure of it. He would be even able to predict how your nose would move to the smell of ammonia, how your mucous membranes could react to it.
Yeah.
But does he know how these changes would affect you? Does he know the particular smell and the effect of that smell on you?
Well, if he's an all-knowing being, I assume he would.
He's not all-knowing. He just knows everything about ammonia.
Oh, okay. Right, that's very limited.
And for the purposes of the argument, let's just say he knows everything about ammonia.
Probably boring at dinner parties.
Very boring. All he can talk about is
ammonia.
Yeah.
So
he knows how it affects you in terms of your chemical processes, your nose, your mind, your brain, everything. But could you say that he knows the experience of smelling ammonia?
Well, it depends what you mean by him knowing everything there is to know about ammonia. Do you mean he knows intellectually, or do you think he knows experientially?
He's never he's never seen ammonia, but he knows what it looks like.
So it's a bit like knowing everything there is to know about oranges, but never having tasted one. Like,
exactly.
I know the orange. I know it's described as citrus and a bit acidy, or
exactly.
Yeah.
So this argument was basically jumped upon by a lot of other philosophers, and then you get a lot of different readings of it, a lot of different examples of it, until another bloke. It seems like all blokes today.
Yeah, we need some more women philosophers in here.
We do. J.W. Donne.
Oh, was he finished?
Not to be confused by John Donne. This guy was also a John Donne, but he was a different
was a John Donne.
Yes.
Okay.
In 1929, he was an aeronautical engineer, a British soldier, and so on. In one of his seminal books, An Experiment with Time, he imagined himself as being a host to a foreign guest.
Yes. Okay. So a dinner party.
Basically, your entertainer. So imagine yourself as J.W. Donne.
Hi, I'm John Donne.
You're hosting a foreign guest.
Hello, foreign guest.
He comes from a land where everybody is born blind.
The foreign guest?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's sad.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yes.
He is blind as well, and he comes to you and he talks to you.
Okay. How did you find me?
He found you through some means or another because you're old friends, shall we say.
Oh, great.
And you are connected by your mutual love for physics and the sciences.
Wonderful.
Yes. So you know all about the sciences, you know about waveforms and everything of the sort.
Okay.
And imagine, you have to understand that he comes from a land where seeing is not a thing. Like literally everybody is blind.
So I guess what you're getting to is how he knows everything there is to know about seeing, in the sense intellectually. Let's just say he could like maybe read books in Braille about what seeing is like and what descriptions of it, but then he wouldn't actually be able to really know because he hasn't experienced it.
Exactly. So this example goes a bit further and says that he doesn't know anything about seeing.
Okay.
At first, because seeing isn't a thing.
Yeah.
He comes to you and you bond over your mutual love for sciences, and you explain to him how waves work, how light works, how eyes, this thing called the eye that he must not have heard of. He explains that the retina gets light and that you can see using your eyeball, and that there are things called cones and rods that detect color and other visual information. And he explains how light is a waveform and particles, and he explains everything to do with physics, the physics of science. And at every turn, this guest says, yep, I understand that, because he's a physics genius, much like yourself. And so...
Oh, wait, my character, yeah, no.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'm no physics genius, trust me.
Well, you're modest, so let's leave it at that.
No, I literally do not know how I got past science in high school. But yes, that's why I'm in the arts.
So he understands everything you say, and he perfectly is able to as far as he can visualize in his mind, visualize and imagine and understand. But could you say, in seeing, that he could see a red poppy?
Well, no, because he hasn't seen a red poppy.
But you explain the electromagnetic waves of a certain length creating red, and you explain how red is, like you say, it's bright, and then you explain what brightness is in terms of luminosity.
Yeah, but he won't actually get it because he won't actually experience it, which I think to me is proof enough of, I think experiential knowledge is probably one of the trumps all other knowledge, possibly.
Basically, and so J.W. Dunn essentially concludes that it's somewhat absurd to assume that, ironically, in explaining what a red poppy is, the one thing that you wouldn't be able to explain is its redness. The quality of it being red. Yeah, something that you and I know as an intrinsic thing, but somebody who's blind may not.
What the texture looks like.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a feeling. It's what philosophers call qualia.
What does qualia mean?
The simple way of stating what a qualia is that they are qualities or properties as perceived or experienced by a person. They're the subjective experiences.
So experience through consciousness, you could say.
Yes, exactly. So a qual, I think, is a singular, could be smelling a poppy or smelling a rose. What is it like to smell a rose? And that answer is a qual.
Right. Okay, yeah, I see what you mean there. That makes sense.
Yeah,
so this person, this foreign guest, does not have the qualia. He's missing the qualia as an important factor of actually knowing what seeing is.
Exactly. Given your conversation with him, you've explained everything to do with the red poppy and with seeing, and he understands the processes, the physical processes of it all through. He understands, he may have even touched a red poppy and felt its features.
Yes.
But he still doesn't know of the qualia of the red poppy. Or if I ask you, what is it like to smell a rose? You could say, oh, it's amazing, it's great, but that doesn't really describe...
It doesn't describe the actual smell and the experience. It's like the experience of the smelling.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
What the experience of the isness of whatever that is. That's qualia.
That is what he was getting to.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting, and you can see where the argument for dualism is kind of beginning to manifest itself.
And I would argue even the argument for consciousness only school of thought would manifest there.
Yeah, most probably, yeah.
You can't experience anything without consciousness.
Exactly, and dualism does express consciousness as part of the mental idea. So it considers mental processes to be basically defining of consciousness. So consciousness being the amalgamation of multiple mental processes and so on.
So basically, that sounds like to me what like the average person learns growing up in school.
Yes, more or less. So after that, there were many other examples. A British philosopher named Howard Robinson described what would happen if a deaf scientist were to look into hearing, and would he really understand hearing or how it is to hear something. Then Thomas Nagel, an American philosopher, gave us a more interesting example actually. He said, imagine if we were a bat. Imagine we know everything about bats. Could we imagine how a bat actually experiences the world through sonar?
No, because we lack the qualia.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can use that word at your dinner party. Well, I've got to say that the appetizers taste amazing, and I know because I have the qualia to taste them.
Oh, wonderful. So I think this all culminates finally in 1982 when a guy called Frank Cameron Jackson. I know.
Sounds like an epic name. Frank Cameron Jackson.
He was a philosopher as well of the mind, epistemology, metaphysics, metaethics, and so on and so forth.
Oh, interesting.
A lot of these philosophers are like, the list of their like specializations just keep going.
That would be great to have on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame.
I think he's still alive.
Oh, well, let's get him on.
we should totally talk to him. Yes.
Yeah.
He described what most people would know as Mary's room.
Look, I don't want to know what he gets up to in his
in
personal
Mary's
time. Room. What happens between him and Mary stays between him and Mary.
In Mary's room.
Leave Mary alone, Azul.
So I got Mary's permission to talk about her room.
Okay, good.
And so let me tell you a story about Mary. The story about Mary.
Something about Mary?
Yes.
Mary
is a scientist. She's a neurologist.
Okay.
She's a genius level IQ. She knows pretty much everything about color. Everything there is to know about color.
Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, the reason's not important, she was forced to live in a room with only a black and white monitor.
Poor Mary.
So she experiences the world through that black and white monitor.
So she's never left the room?
She's never left the room, and she has never seen color. But she knows everything about color. She knows all the physical information to do with color. So she knows what a ripe tomato looks like. She knows that the sky is supposed to be described by this term called blue.
So the same as this foreign guest, but she still is lacking the qualia.
Yes.
And the actual experience of that. So she wouldn't know.
Exactly.
Really.
So skipping through the usual her knowing about all the things that is blue or red or whatever, Frank Jackson essentially asks one quite important question.
He said, to be frank,
when Mary leaves her room and sees for the first time red or a red apple or a blue sky, does she learn anything new?
Oh, that's a great question. I imagine she does. I imagine she doesn't and does at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's always been an inherent ability in her eyes. So her brain already know how to do that, but it like blow her mind like, oh my gosh, colours. You know, like those, yes.
No, exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. So Frank Jackson essentially posited from that, if she does learn something new, then physicalism is wrong or false because she knows all the physical information of it.
Sorry, how is physicalism disproved in that?
So the idea is that she knows all the physical processes to do with perceiving the colors or perceiving colors.
Okay.
So there's nothing new for her to learn.
Okay.
But if she goes outside and sees a red apple for the first time and learns something from that experience, that means she's obtaining some knowledge that was not physical.
Well, yeah, but then you could argue as a physicalist that experience triggered a reaction in her brain that made her understand it or something.
You could argue that it's the act of perceiving, so her going and looking at it, that caused this new information to be available to her.
Yes.
But the idea that we're positing from Mary's room is that she knows everything about color, about perceiving color. There should be no information left for her to see or to gain.
Oh, but the only thing she has gained is the actual qualia.
Exactly. But qualia is not a physicalist person,
I see what you mean. That does disprove physicalism.
A qualia is a subjective experience. It's more like a quality of a perception, right?
Yeah.
And that is a mental
True. So then that's
ideal.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you.
So we've got to the end of the philosophy section of the podcast. Now
It's a long road, but we made it.
We did.
We went through a few dinner parties that were a bit awkward, but we got there.
Just as a recap, we now know that there are two different points of view, physicalism and dualism.
Yes.
And we know that physicalism asserts that all things are physical, and dualism asserts that there are two aspects to it.
Great.
Brilliant. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I cheated a bit and made you a bit more excited. So we are going to talk about zombies, but not your typical zombies.
Oh, damn it. That actually is my worst nightmare.
Oh, yeah?
To be chased by zombies.
But zombies are so cool.
They are terrifying. They're dead. They're corpses that are chasing after you.
I love
want to eat you.
I love zombie movies.
They scare me. They really scare me. That, like, if there's a zombie apocalypse, I'd be crapping my pants.
I'd be so happy.
Yeah. You'd be so happy there was a... What? Okay. Well, great. I would be so freaked out.
If there's a zombie apocalypse and you're alive, come to me and we'll sort something
Actually, no, I've already got a plan if there's a zombie apocalypse.
I'm so insulted that I'm not involved in
I know, but you should come with me, actually, because I'm going to my co-worker. She's already prepared for a zombie apocalypse. Jokingly, she has a whole range of guns, and she said she would, she knows how to use those guns, and she has like the attitude that would be like a survivor's attitude, and she's already said, like, if there is a zombie apocalypse, you can come to me and I'll protect it. There'll be a whole group. She's fierce.
You need to tell her that she needs to have like a fair amount of melee weapons as well, because guns will fall short very quickly in a zombie apocalypse.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she'll be prepared.
Okay,
yeah,
just making sure.
She'll yeah.
She's
a toughie.
It's good.
Yeah, well, you should come join us. We should merge into one large zombie survival group.
Totally. Let's do it.
Okay, done.
So we're going to talk about a term called philosophical zombies.
Okay.
So imagine a world, and imagine this world is identical to our world.
Okay, so yeah, this world.
Actually, yeah, that's fair enough.
Yes.
So it's identical to this world, no differences. The only difference is that the people in that world, not our world, these humans or these human bodies don't have consciousness.
Okay, so
they go through the same... No, they're not.
They're biologically alive.
They are biologically alive.
Okay.
They are identical to us, but they cannot experience things. They are essentially human bodies walking around doing the same things that we do, building buildings, making their usual motions, building bridges, making telephones, creating electricity, telegraphs, writing and reading books, speaking in parliament, for all we know.
I would argue they wouldn't do any of those things without consciousness.
This is fair. Perhaps I jumped the gun by saying consciousness. They essentially they can't experience things. They can't have qualia.
Exactly. They can't experience qualia.
Yes, they can't. They don't have qualia.
So qualia being, just as a reminder, is a qualia that are like the features of an experience of something.
Yes.
Like the brownness of a tree.
Yeah, or
a qualia is like a feature, a quality of the tree.
Yes.
Right.
A good way of imagining qualia is always ask the what. So what is it like to and something?
Okay, and then that's a great way.
Okay,
and then you find the qualia of something.
Yes. So basically, this situation was coined as a zombie world by G.F. Stout, an English philosopher and psychologist in 1931. But the idea behind this was essentially that a zombie or a human body without qualia could exist, possibly. But they would be fundamentally different from how you and I are.
Oh, yeah, they would be drastically different, I imagine.
Yep, and so then came up things like the Imitation Man and other similar situations where this idea of a human being, or as close of a human being as we can get without these qualia, were posited as being theoretically possible.
Okay.
Finally, we come to this idea that if we are incapable of experiencing or obtaining qualia, then we are essentially a husk. So a philosophical zombie is a being that is very close to a human being but cannot obtain qualia, cannot experience things. They have the capabilities of doing everything we do, except they cannot react. Well, they cannot experience pain, or they do not know how pain feels, but if you prick them, they'll react in the same way somebody else would react.
Okay, got it.
Finally, we get to Robin Williams.
Whoa. Did Robin Williams not experience qualia?
No, that would be terrible.
Yes.
So in Good Will Hunting, there's this wonderful situation where I always love. This is the best scene in existence because I consider myself a averagely intelligent person, and so when people who are really, really smart talk to me about the really, really smart things, I just kind of think about this scene and make myself happy and content. The scene is essentially, so Robin Williams is as a psychologist, is talking to Matt Damon, who is a student, who is a genius, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
He just reads things and he can remember them, everything. So he's read thousands of books or hundreds or whatever, and he knows all of them by word, by word, by word. And so there's a situation where Robin Williams is trying to talk to Matt Damon and trying to understand Matt Damon as a human being, and Matt Damon just throws facts at him. So he says, oh, you're just using this psychological principle on me. Too bad. Or like just playing around with him. And then Robin Williams gets annoyed. And he says something that is quite interesting. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, if he asked Matt Damon about art, Matt Damon would tell him all about Michelangelo, all about what Michelangelo's life's work were, or how these artists worked, what these artists created, and all of those things, because he knows everything, right?
Okay.
But if Robin Williams asked if Matt Damon could tell him what it feels like to stand and smell in the Sistine Chapel, he wouldn't be able to do anything.
Yeah, that's a great. I think I remember that scene. That's a good one.
He goes on to say that he can ask about so many different things, like what is it to touch a woman, shall we say, in this example. He could have read all sorts of erotica, but he doesn't really know the warmth of another human being. Have you ever experienced war? If I ask you about war, you could tell me all about Shakespeare and you could tell me about all the poets who experienced war. But could you tell me how it is to be in a trench in the mud and watch your friend die as you stand in it?
Yeah.
And I am exaggerating slightly, but the idea behind this is that he was bringing into this idea that there is something more than just the physical.
Okay. Yeah. Qualia.
And it's quite interesting because if that is true, Alex,
yes,
if what I've been trying to say is true, or what Robin Williams is saying is true, everything proven by science is questionable.
Whoa, we this is a bombshell. Wow. Okay.
Because science bases itself on physicalism.
True. And that's a very good point. Wow.
Like, what is there to even believe at this point?
Okay, guys, so if you're just listening to this, just, walking to work in the morning, we don't want to trigger an existential crisis, so you just be sitting at your desk just staring into space. What does it all mean? How do we know what's real? The whole, foundation of existence is, gone?
Yeah. It is interesting, and it is somewhat of an existential crisis-causing idea. I understand that you have your own beliefs with regards to consciousness.
Yeah.
But on a passing comment, if somebody said everything was physical, you would just say, laugh at them and say no, because, there's your soul, or, your being, or something there that is more than just physical, right?
Yeah.
But, holy shit. If that's the case, then we don't really comprehend the fact that science would essentially be redundant in that situation.
I actually disagree.
Yeah?
I think that science is actually going to get to the same place as that, but it takes longer because it's going through physicalism, right, as its foundational truth. But actually, that's not strictly true because, for example, you've got quantum physics and theoretical physics, which are pushing, boundaries, and more, it's becoming proven how insubstantial physical existence is. And a classic example would be an atom being 99% empty space. And more, it seems like science is finding out, actually existence is made out of, waves and energy. This is my very, very expert knowledge on science, but you could see that scientific inquiry is leading, by the looks of it, to non-physical answers, right? Well, non-physicalist answers, I should say. So I think it's not entirely redundant. Yeah.
You have a good point, and I do hope that eventually we can actually explain these minutiae and all the things to do with it.
Yeah.
As with quantum physics and so on. But it is a worrying thought. And why this matters for you and me, why this matters to you, or why this should matter to any of us, is the simple question of, what do you do with your life?
Okay.
Let me elaborate.
Elaborate. I was going to say that's a question.
So, A lot of us are content earning money and living in one place and learning as much as possible. That's basically finding love, I suppose, and that sort of thing.
Yes.
But it begs the question, is there something different between a person who travels the world or learns new languages or experiences a lot of things versus a person who has experienced less things?
Well, I think there would be quite a difference between those two people.
Go on.
Because they experience more, you could say they have lived more. To be entirely cold and seemingly objective, they've gathered more and more information about and more qualia about like living life. So they've experienced more qualia. So technically, if the meaning of life is to live, which is what life is, then they've fulfilled that because they've gained more qualia.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, it's a possible idea. I could ask you, what is it that is meant by living life? You know, if I were to stand in a room or sit in a room and read books about life and the universe, Oliver Twist, C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, would I not be living life?
Well, actually, that's not a bad way to spend your time.
Exactly.
Those amazing.
I would love to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are different kinds of qualia, aren't they? Wouldn't they?
They are.
Because it'd be does imagination count as qualia?
You know, I don't know.
Yeah. Because that's a different experience of life.
That's a whole other aspect.
If you want to experience the whole of life, right? That would include using your imagination and your mental capacity. So it wouldn't just be like traveling, all these new experiences, meeting people, connecting with others, going on different adventures and doing different hobbies, like, I don't know, juggling or something.
Yeah.
So, just trying different things. It'd also be engaging your mental faculty as well. So it'd be using your imagination. So I reckon a balance of the two would be a full experience of life, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and honestly, the most surprising thing about this is recently, I think a few months ago or a year ago, a University of Pittsburgh psychologist named Paul Nussbaum did a study on the differences of the brain chemistry in individuals who've traveled and who have not traveled.
Oh, and what did he find?
And he found that people who have traveled have a more active brain. Their brain has more connections. It has more cerebral matter and so on.
Interesting.
So the phrase of travel the world and expand your mind quite literally allows you. Yeah, exactly.
Wow. What is it about this that's made you question the foundation and the reliability of scientific inquiry? What is it about that that's made you question, like, what do we do with our life?
Well, it isn't to say that I'm questioning science. I am a firm advocate for the scientific method, and I do believe in facts rather than other nonsense and so on and so forth. But it is quite interesting to think about these contradictory views that I hold, because I would like to believe that there is something in experiencing something.
Yes.
I would like to think that there is more to going to a location than to read a book about that location.
Yeah.
However, if I believe in that, that would lead to me having to put suspicion on or put doubts on the scientific method.
No, not. I wouldn't say so.
No?
It'd only be certain schools. The scientific world is very broad. There's a lot of different perspectives in it. So it'd only be certain perspectives that you would disagree with. Well, a lot of other scientists might agree with you, and you'd probably get along quite well.
Probably. I guess the whole idea is that most of scientific principles is based on facts.
Yeah.
Most of scientific principles are based on observable, objective, or as objective as you can get, facts.
Yeah.
They do not account for the fact that there is this other realm, shall we say, of mental processes that can affect the physical realm.
Mm.
If that were the case, if there are mental processes...
Like emotions, I guess.
Yes.
Right.
If those don't originate from physical processes, if they're all self-contained.
Yeah.
That would mean science is ignoring a huge part of things. I mean, people who believe in, who are anti-science would have a field day with it, really.
Yeah. And actually, it's true. I've actually come across criticisms of science or some aspects of science where, okay, it seems to be ignoring certain aspects of existence. But there's a lot of science now that's actually moving towards that, and they might not be as popular. As we move into the future and new technology gets created, like, for example, assimilating technology into our own brains, then questions about consciousness become more relevant. So I think maybe bit by bit we'd start breaking into it. And we've already started breaking ground with regard to this.
Oh, yeah. And the future is the most scary with regards to this, because we come back to this idea of zombies and Robin Williams, really. Because if Robin Williams asserts that you should experience things, right? And you should experience things personally. Robin Williams is the antithesis of zombies, or philosophical zombies in this case.
Yes.
If I were to copy you into a computer and create an android out of that.
Okay.
So it would have exactly the same brain as you do. And if I took that android, Alex, and took it to France, shot it around, brought it back, and uploaded that information to your head, would you have experienced France?
No, because it's not the quality. All I'm experiencing is the information that android's gained, but not the actual qualia that were there.
And that's when the whole idea of qualia and everything kind of gets into this gray area, right? Because if that is all information, if the qualia is also information within your brain, then you could upload it into you.
Yes.
Which means physicalism is correct.
Okay.
But if it isn't, if there's something else in that android, or there's something that android could not obtain, then you haven't, and physicalism is wrong.
Well, that depends, because then the thing is, the android that you create would have to be able to experience qualia. So basically, this android would have to have consciousness.
Yeah, and it comes down to, so, like, what if the android could measure temperature and measure the breeze, and it all receives that into its memory banks, and then you would think of it as your past?
But see, the same thing would happen. It'd be I'd have all this data about the experience, but not the experiencing itself.
That's
so
a good
it would
point.
be, it would still be the same thing, the same conclusion.
I have no answer to this, and I'm glad you're more certain about it than I do.
Yeah, well, it seems pretty clear to me, I think. I don't know. I probably got it wrong. But I think maybe what we can take from this is that in order to live life then more fully, we need to experience more qualia, have more experience, whether mental or, well, I mean, it's all mental technically because it's qualia. Gaining more qualia is fundamental to us experiencing life. Yeah,
Well,
so gaining more experiences is fundamental to us experiencing life, which seems kind of obvious in that statement.
No, but
it's true.
it's something that needs to be said, and Paul Nussbaum goes further into this and says, if you don't have the capabilities of traveling, try something new, change your routine, learn a new language, go somewhere just nearby that's new, because your brain is constantly changing, and when it sees something it hasn't seen, or when it experiences something it hasn't experienced, it changes. It needs to make room for you. And so you could fight off things like Alzheimer's and sorts of things. That's what he was actually working on.
Right.
And like all of this is to do with experiencing things. And so we come back to the wonderful, wonderful late Robin Williams, who was a firm advocate of experiencing things. He was always smiling. He was always living life to the fullest, or at least he was trying. And this dichotomy between physicalism and dualism is essentially just that. Do we stand as it is and just function as machines with the idea of just going through the usual steps? Birth, growth, death. Or do we try to expand our minds quite literally and figuratively? Do we, experience new things and see the world and see other people, understand people, and so on?
So it seems like naturally we're almost hardwired to want to experience more.
Perhaps so, you and me. I don't know if we can make that statement for everybody, though.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, like, what I'm saying is from what you were saying about the brain responding well to learning new things and to experiencing new things is like almost as if from an evolutionary standpoint, like we need to experience more. I guess to answer your question, you said before, what do we do with our lives? Seems like the answer that's come up is experience more. But then we still have the question of meaning. Like, what's the point? Why?
Yeah.
Why go through all the trouble of getting all these qualia? I'm using qualia quite loosely here.
Yeah, and actually going back to what you just said, we don't know if qualia is, well, we don't know if physicalism is real or dualism of mind is real, right? So honestly, it could be pointless to experience things, as in travel and stuff like that. Sure, you can expand your mind, but you might as well expand your mind by doing Sudoku puzzles.
Well, actually, it wouldn't be pointless, because then you come back to the question of meaning, the fundamental philosophical question of meaning.
Well, to wrap up this episode, Alex, what have you learned today?
Well, I've learned that experience is fundamental to life, and that if we want to live life more fully, we need to experience more. We need to gain qualia, and that I'm more strongly against physicalism. Not in an aggressive way, but it seems to make less and less sense to me.
That's fair.
Because of qualia. And qualia, quite a fascinating thing. So experience more, I guess, is what I've learned from this, and go and do things. I mean, it could be quite a jump from what we've learned if you're going purely scientifically, but I reckon for something that I can apply to my own life, experience more. Gain more quality, and it's good for your brain. That's something that has really helped. It's good for your brain to experience new things. It's almost true. Like we've been like I said before, we've been hardwired to want to experience more. That our bodies need to experience life to the full, and experience things to the full, and keep learning, and experiencing, and living. So that for me is an encouragement to keep doing that.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. How about you, Azul?
Well, I'm a bit on the fence, more so than you are, I think. And honestly, I admire you for being able to take a stance like that.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of an agnostic in this regard, because I'm not sure what to believe in. I would truly like to believe that dualism is real. I don't know. I suppose I would like to experience some new things, and I think I'm on Robin Williams' side when I say that there is something to experience rather than just reading about it. I would rather go to a place and read about that place. That being said, I am a firm advocate of the scientific method. So really, I don't know. I just confused myself, and now I'm in a terrible, terrible situation.
I don't think you confused yourself. I think you've answered your own question.
It's cognitive dissonance, Alex. I'm in two camps at the same time. It's like
no, because the fact is, what really matters that you can take away into your own life is that scene from Good Will Hunting really speaks to you.
It does.
And that it rings true. And that, for you it is true. And for me it is true. That you actually learn all there is to know about something, but you can't really know it until you experience it.
Yeah.
And if you want to live life to the full, you can't live life until you live it.
Yeah. And in fact, listeners, my advice is that if at any point in time you think that you are not smart enough compared to some other person, or you feel demeaned by that person, just remember this scene. Remember, as if you've experienced more things than this book smart or otherwise genius IQ level person, you're better than them in
brilliant.
Some other way. That's how I survive life. So there you have it. My 2 cents for you all.
We've got a lot of weapons we've given you for passive aggressive dinner parties. So those who throw away the fancy words and the other people, now you've given weapons to those who are on the receiving end of those fancy words.
Yeah.
So let's go to dinner parties and go to war. I really feel like dinner.
Do you want to have dinner?
Yeah. Hey guys, that's us for another episode. Thank you all for listening. We hope we gave you a smile and something to think about.
If you like this episode, please give us a rating on Apple.
Every 5-star rating goes a long way to help us keep going and reach more people. We really appreciate all your support.
You can find us on Facebook as Confuddled Podcast.
On Twitter at Confuddled_pod. That's CONFUDDLED_POD.
And on Instagram at Confuddled_podcast. Or just email us at confuddledpodcast@gmail.com.
We love hearing from you. Share your comments, queries, ideas, suggestions, lightbulb moments.
And your deepest, darkest secrets.
Maybe not.
So get in touch.
Okay, until next week.
Yeah, we've been waiting for